guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Beasley for Reed.
My goodness, down in the bayou.
Edwards. Nice. Ant kisses it in. It's an Ant one. Beverley right on cue comes up with a rebound and Towns. Absolutely obliterating the rim. Edwards on the attack, and Anthony Edwards leaving the fans with one last highlight.
Did you guys know that the Timberwolves have a lineup of death?
A lineup of death? No.
Remember the Warriors when they first launched their dynasty?
Yeah.
And I think this was even before Kevin Durant. And I can't remember. I mean, it was Clay, Steph, Draymond, I think Harrison Barnes, and then somebody else.
Andre Iguodala, maybe?
Probably Iguodala, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was like, statistically, it was the lineup of death, where when those five guys were on the court at the same time, it was just game over, lights out, the plus minus was off the charts. So according to our friend Key Sang on Twitter, here is the Timberwolves lineup of death. When Karl Anthony Towns, Jared Vanderbilt, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell, and Patrick Beverley are on the court together. This is now the most used Wolves lineup this season, too, by the way. They have a net rating of plus 51 points per 100 possessions. Their offensive rating is a 134 per 100 possessions, and their defensive rating is an 83.5 per 100 possessions. That lineup of death is a plus 50.8 points per 100 possessions. I think you know what that means, Judd.
I've got one thing to say to that.
Get the flag.
The flag will fly. The flag will fly. Oh, yeah. There it
Get
is.
the flag.
There it
Wave
is.
that flag. You got to wave the flag with momentum.
I think it's hard. It's hard to wave it.
It's a pennant.
My guess is
Is it?
it's a pennant on a
pennant.
stick, and
It's a pennant on a stick.
and it probably sits loosely
I love
on
how
the stick.
Yeah,
quickly
yeah.
that got
Phil's
shot
exactly
down.
right.
Okay.
See what,
So it
look,
doesn't.
look, this thing is a flag, so I can
It's
really
like,
wave
the
a
wild
flag.
one's like stapled to the stick there. Yeah, it's
Exactly.
difficult.
This is a pennant, so it blows. It blows.
There it is. Wave it.
Phil hit it exactly. Phil got it exactly right. A pennant on a stick that's loosely on the stick. Wow, Phil, that was good.
Dude, a lineup of death. You know that you have,
Oh,
and
boy.
I don't want to hear. Like, well, look who they're playing. They're beating a bunch of bottom feeders. Newsflash: for like 17 years, the Timberwolves were the George Washington on the Mount Rushmore of NBA bottom feeders. Okay,
They
and
were
so
the-
step one out of NBA purgatory is to beat the bottom feeders, and then you can worry about who their opponents are once you start doing that.
And let's not forget, Thanksgiving Eve, Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat come to town. So there's a real
go.
opportunity.
You want
There's
this
an
smoke, Jimmy?
opportunity. Exactly right. And you got 22 now. And I don't mean Wiggy.
Oh, dude.
You got Pat Bev. And Pat Bev, hold on, I can't stop myself.
Let's go.
There you go. As much enthusiasm as I can get from Lieutenant Jackie. Thank you, Jeff Biernicki. Thank you, Timberwolves.
That's right. Yeah, you don't want none of this smoke, Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, you got your
This,
chance tomorrow.
This note, too, coming in from Jace Frederick, literally right as we're recording. The Timberwolves starting lineup of D'Lo, Ant, Pat, Bev, and Vando have a net rating of 50+. That's the best net rating of any NBA lineup per 25.
Oh, boy.
One more time, John. One more time.
Thanks, Frederick. With the
The
stats.
Wolves are
Thanks,
back.
Frederick.
They're back.
The Wolves are back.
We'll just do the whole show like this.
Amazing, dude.
Wait, he said that's the best five-man combo in the NBA, you said? Is that what you said?
With at least 25 minutes played, the next best rating of any lineup with at least 80 minutes is plus 28 by Atlanta and New York.
Is the 92 Olympic dream team.
Is the dream team.
It's like Magic.
The
When
lineup of
Magic,
death.
Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, John
Dream team.
Stockton were on the court together.
Warriors, 2021 Timberwolves.
Get it.
It's all the same thing.
Think about the difference in meaning that phrase has had for this franchise for years. Lineup of death. Oh my God, I got to watch these guys. It's going to be the death of me. To now, it's an unstoppable five. The unstoppable five is basically what we got.
Yeah, and again, like I know that there's this, well, look who they're beating. Wait till the Heat come to town. That's not okay. This season was never going to be about beating all the best teams in the end. Now they've hung a couple. They beat the Bucks. The Bucks had a couple guys out. Drew Holiday didn't play in that game. Middleton did play in that game, and they beat a LeBron-less Lakers team. That Suns game would have been a great win. The Suns have now won 13 straight games. They're just back to being.
I love the Suns. Nice club.
It's a great team.
Yes.
But this was never. And let's go back 20 plus years. If you remember, and actually it's funny because a lot of the people that have probably discovered Mackey and Judd and Score North on YouTube or like Spotify probably weren't even alive in the mid-90s. Declan, what year were you born? 94?
92.
So you don't even really remember the first playoff season for the Timberwolves, right? Like
Barely.
1996, 97?
No. I remember the numerous first-round exits before their run to the Western Conference Finals. I remember those very vividly. I went to a lot of those games as a kid, but not their first run, no.
So they had 8 straight playoff seasons, but in 1996-97, so they drafted Stephon Marbury. KG had been around for 1 year. They fired, who was it, Bill Blair, I think?
Yes, and promoted Flip.
And so they had a new coach, they had a young nucleus, they had some new players coming in, and they were carrying 7 or 8 years of just bottom feeding, losing expansion seasons. And they started that season, 1996-97, with new coach, players, young nucleus, carrying the weight of losing season after losing season. They started that year 8-17, which I kind of forgot. They were terrible to start that season. It wasn't until like late December that team really started figuring out, okay, this is who we are. This is how we can close out games. Okay, this is what KG is going to move into this sort of leadership role here. Marbury, KG playing off each other. What do the complementary players do? And then they started So they feasted on the bad teams, and then they started sprinkling in wins against, like they beat the Utah Jazz at the end of December. That was the best team in the Western Conference. So and by the way, that team finished 2 games under 500, but it was by far the best season at that point in the history of Timberwolves basketball. Mm-hmm. But that was the step. The step was start slow, figure this thing out. Okay, start beating the bad teams, mix in a couple signature wins against the top teams in the Western Conference, sneak into the playoffs, take your lumps, and then get better next year. Now, of course, that team took playoff lumps for like 6 years before, 6 or 7 years, and then eventually they actually took the next step. But that's the thing. Like, this is going to look ugly at times, but the fact that they are demolishing bottom-feeding teams is a great first step out of NBA purgatory, and it's been a blast to watch the last week and a half.
And at least in the case of the Pelicans, the Grizzlies, who aren't terrible, they're not great, but in both of those cases too, keep in mind, the Timberwolves lost to them this year. They lost to the Pelicans in what was consecutive games at home in October. They lost to the Grizzlies after, I think, having a pretty comfortable lead in overtime at Memphis. They lost to the Magic at home. So, like, that's the thing too, is that I think the eye on the prize that we need to keep when it comes to like the Vikings and the Wolves, who are obviously at very different places in their paths, is this: don't focus on the opponents all the time. Focus on, do they beat themselves? Like this whole thing about Packer fans being like, well, our team was depleted, you're lucky, enjoy your win. I didn't watch that game at all for like, what are they doing against the Green Bay Packers? I was like, oh my God, they're throwing the football. Like, this makes sense for the Vikings aren't beating the Vikings. Forget about the opponent. And in the Wolves case, I don't care what team you're playing. They are legitimately playing defense now. Mm-hmm. And that's the so like the fixation on, are you going to beat the top teams? That can certainly come eventually, but playing defense is something that hell, this team a month ago, Phil, didn't do. So like, that's the thing, is we get so caught up sometimes in who are you playing. And if your team is really good, that's cool. But if your team is like where our teams are lots of times, it's more about like, are you being stupid and trying to beat yourselves? And if the answer is no, that's the positive.
Mm-hmm. Jared Vanderbilt has been incredible for this team. He's not at all a household name even among Timberwolves fans. If you're just sort of ducking, I know there's a lot of Wolves fans that probably have like YouTube TV or Hulu and Haven't even watched a game because Bally Sports North hasn't been on it in like 2 years. But he's been such a great off-the-ball player. Defense, rebounding, he'll block shots. He gets hands in passing lanes. And Patrick Beverley, who's been in the league now, he's in his early 30s. He's been in the league for like a decade. He mostly played on playoff teams, right, with the Rockets and the Clippers. And he has played with some of the best two-way players and defensive players in the league. Kawhi Leonard's an all-time great defensive player, in his prime before the injuries. And Paul George has been a great defensive player. And Pat, I should have told Jason to pull this, but Pat Beverley talked to the media last night, and he said, I don't mean this as a knock on Vanderbilt. I had no idea how good he was defensively. I just, until I signed here and started practicing with him and then playing in the same lineup as him and seeing him on the court, he's legitimately one of the best defensive players I've ever played with, including Kawhi Leonard and Paul George.
Wow.
Yep.
So that's pretty high praise for a guy that I don't think he was drafted. I want to say, maybe I'm wrong on that. Was he a second-round draft pick? But, not a heralded player, not a guy that you were thinking of as a core piece to this thing taking off again. It was like, if they could get Jared Vanderbilt back, that would be great. But he's turned into, the core reason why their defense is among the best in the NBA so far.
So I think Jim Pete brought this up last year, again, which shows how good Jim Pete is at what he does. I think Jim Pete at some point in time when Jared had started to play and clearly brought the things that you just talked about, Phil, made a comparison to, and it was not like a hard and fast, but he said, this is Rodman like he does the same things that the Worm did. And it's a pretty good point. If you think about it, because when Dennis started being the player that he became, he wasn't like a household name. He became one, partially because of the antics off the court as well. But when he was in Detroit and hadn't dyed the hair yet and was just playing, he did a lot of these same things. It's not sexy. It's not like, oh my God, you got to see this. But if you watch the games consistently, eye test wise, it's a huge part of potential success.
So he was a mid second round draft pick by the Magic in 2018. What I didn't really know about him, I knew he went to Kentucky, but what I didn't know was that he was one of the top 10 recruits out of high school before he went to Kentucky. And he was a McDonald's All-American in 2017. But he kind of got lost a little bit. He wasn't this fully honed, well-rounded player like Towns was to go number 1 overall. And so he entered the draft, got drafted in the second round, and has grinded his way through multiple G League teams, and he was with the Nuggets for a couple of years, kind of bouncing up and down. But he was at one point 4 or 5 years ago one of the most highly touted 17-year-old basketball players in the world. And I don't think he has the potential to be like a top 20 player in the NBA, but he's showing you he can be one of the best defensive players in the league, and it's been fun to watch. The other thing too, so D'Lo last night. On the surface, you would look and say, God, dude, he shot 3 of 16 or something, and he was 1 of 10 from three-point range. And ordinarily, I would get on the show today and be like, Guy, what are you, just a little bit of self-awareness here. Mm-hmm. Well, almost all the shots he took, if for sure in the second half, were just wide-open threes that you have to take if you're him. And he just hasn't found his shot yet this season. He, like many players, has pointed out that the new basketball is just not working for him. So it's a little bit of a cop-out because not everyone is struggling with the new basketball, but I will say this about D'Lo. He is impacting the game in other ways that he didn't last year and maybe even at previous stops. Even in Brooklyn, he was, if he wasn't scoring, he wasn't adding a ton of value. And this season, he actually has the best plus-minus net rating of any player on the team, and he hasn't found his shot yet. And if you compare that also with what you see with your eyes, he's more active defensively. He's not going to be a lockdown defender. I'm not saying he's ever going to be Kawhi Leonard, but he's been more active defensively. He's been great as a passer off pick and roll. And I think he's done a good job of just sort of facilitating and getting the offense started when he's not also playing chucker. There's still a little bit too much chucker for me, especially when you haven't found your shot yet.
And Towns is there.
Yeah, but
Carl's there. He can play.
Yeah, but a credit to D'Lo for impacting the game in other ways even though his shot hasn't started falling yet this season.
And you know who's looking pretty damn good right now? I don't know where he is, but Gerson. Gerson's looking pretty. Gerson has built a nice team here. Like, he got Finch, he built this team, and I'll say this because it's an intangible thing I love, and I feel like a lot of fans now in this day and age of professional sports sell this short. The Beverley acquisition, he literally brings a player. And I think that Tibbs thought Butler was going to do this. And he was so destructive that he didn't at all. In fact, it went the opposite way. But Beverley, and we talked about this when he came here to me, brings the same thing that Bill Guerin brought in last year with Bonino and Cole. A stabilizing influence of somebody who has seen success, seen great players, seen championships, and knows how it works. And has the ability and intensity, but it's positive. So it's not this destructive, Cat, you don't try hard, you suck. It's not that. It's here's how we're going to get more. And I'm going to get mad sometimes, but it's not going to be. I felt like Butler was ultimately so into the theater, the production of here's what I'm going to say. And I'm mad now and everyone should know it. I'm going to go to practice and school you guys. Well, that's not productive. Beverley, I think, just brings a sensible, super intense knowledge of how to get where the next step is. And I don't know in professional sports without that player if that step is possible. Cruz, when the Twins, now it didn't go the way that they hoped it would, but 2019 for the Twins was fun. And that's the last year that we got access to the clubhouse on a consistent basis. And I just remember going into that clubhouse and realizing the stabilizing force that Cruz brought because he knew how to get there and he knew what to say. And he also knew my approach is going to be followed. So if I do the wrong thing, my example is really bad. If I do the right thing, I basically can set a tone. And I think now, because we're so into stats and what does this guy do and the efficiency rate, that we lose sight of that intangible, which is, can you plop a guy in the room who can show Cat? I mean, Cat's got talent that we don't question, but can you show him the way? And that's why I love the upgrade from that perspective, Phil and Dex, from Ricky to Bev, because like Ant was like, Ricky's great, he shows me stuff, and look, I'm sure he's a great guy, but he doesn't know that step. Beverley has seen far more of how you get there.
Here's what's amazing about Patrick Beverley. So he was he's never played on a losing NBA team. Let's start there.
Yeah.
So this is his 10th season in the NBA, I believe, 10th or 11th. And so he came in the NBA when he was 24 years old. I'll get to what he did before that in a second. He has literally never played on a losing NBA team. Now, obviously, he's a role player. He's not LeBron James. He's not going from like one franchise to another and bringing 40 wins with him, like when LeBron goes to and from the Cavs or whatnot. So it helps when you're playing with a bunch of great players and you're playing with James Harden in his prime in Houston, and then you're playing with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George and these guys in Los Angeles. So I'm not giving him full credit. He's not the reason solely why these teams are winning, but in terms of knowing what winning looks like, he has played 10 NBA seasons. He has never played on a losing team.
Yep.
Before he went to the NBA, so he was a second-round draft pick in 2009 by the Lakers. And he decided, I think he got cut, and then he decided that he was going to go play professionally in Greece and then in Russia. So his 1 year in Greece, he won the Greece Cup. And then his 1 year in Russia, he won their championship, the Russian Cup in 2011. He was a Russian League All-Star, Guard of the Year, and Defensive Player of the Year. He was All Euro Cup first team in 2012 and the Euro Cup MVP in 2012. And he was also, I should mention, in college, he was also like All SEC. So literally everywhere this dude has been. He's been a role player for the majority of his career, but he doesn't know what losing looks like. 2 championships in Europe in different countries. and then 9 years of winning and playoff basketball. Now, he hasn't won a championship in the NBA, but I think there's something to that, right? He comes in, and I also love the fact that when this team started slowly and when they were just playing like absolute garbage and getting their doors blown off in the fourth quarter, I was half worried that like Beverley was going to have buyer's remorse on getting traded here and just think to himself, what is this? Jimmy Butler was right. I need to GTFO, man. Get me out of here. And he had the opposite reaction. It was, no, it's all good. Let's keep working. And it's hard to quantify his presence and what he's brought to the table, but obviously it's been a steady hand that comes from over a decade of winning experience that this franchise doesn't have. When you combine Cat and D'Lo's career, like the teams that they've played on and the career records, it's like 200 games under 500. And I'm not blaming them because those guys have been good players throughout their careers, but those guys have just been stuck in losing for like a combined 13 seasons. They don't know what it feels like, and Patrick Beverley does, and obviously he's having a positive influence.
And this is the one thing that you don't want to subject especially Ant to. Like, you want Ant around people who know how to win. And the thing with Pat Bev too is I think there's a why here, Phil. Why did the list of teams that you ran down want him? So like he's not LeBron. He's not this guy who's going to bring you, oh my God, we're going to start to win games because of Pat Bev. So the question becomes, why do winning teams want him? The answer is simple, because he knows what it takes, and he can probably be one of two things. The final piece, like a piece, not a great piece, but an incredibly important piece, or in the Wolves case, show us what you know. And like, how can we sample from that? And I'll tell you, the most important thing too is this, and this is a gear that Butler didn't have. And I don't think Butler has the inherent savvy and smarts that Beverley does. So in one of the games a few weeks back, it was like a month probably ago now, when Cat was full meltdown mode. And it's the game that the Wolves didn't get a bunch of calls, and the fans were saying, ref, you suck. And Cat's like cheering the fans on, bring it on, bring it on. And Pat Bev got screwed too, or he thought. He, first of all, told guys, shut up. Second of all, he went to the official and didn't complain. He like tried to make peace. And I'm like, that's really impressive. Like, he's mad, but he sees the star players are losing control. The last game I went to, he was mad at the officials, and like it was a call on him, but the Wolves weren't, Cat was fine. So like, it's not like a total freak out mode. And he went and complained. So like, he is very savvy and very smart, because he knew in that case, I've got to stand up for my team and me. But in the other case, knew this is melting down and it's doing none of us any good. Like, that's a gear and that's a smarts that a lot of guys don't have. And that's, again, where it comes back to, do you know what it looks like to be successful? And that's the type of thing. And it's probably really, really small, but that's the type of thing that I think is so important.